Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how are you doing?
How's it going, Henry? I'm doing well.
I'm doing well also. Good to have you. It's going to be the two of us, and the focus of today's episode is Dune, the just released HBO Max movie, Dune, and we're going to get into it. We're going to get into some detail. So, spoiler alert, we'll definitely get into spoiler territory on Dune. Real quick, the Comic Sauce podcast is on social media. Catch us at Comic Sauce Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, today is October 23rd, 2021, and Dune has just come out. So let's get right into it. So let's start with our experience watching Dune. Like I said, this is just released on HBO Max, but it's also in theaters. How did you watch Dune, Christian?
I watched it on HBO Max for free when it came out.
There you go. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's a pretty common thing
Mhm.
for those who have watched Dune. I'm sure that's most people, HBO Max.
Yeah, it's so convenient and it's
Yeah.
free like with the subscription. Although watching this movie it's like, "Oh man, I really wish I watched it in theaters."
Yeah, I had a similar reaction. I too watched it on HBO Max and I thought, dang, this would have been cool to see for the first time on the big screen, right? Um, so as it is, it's pretty cool that we got to watch it essentially for free at home on TV. But yeah, this is a good one for the theaters, no question.
Mhm.
Okay, but taking a step back, we both watched it at home on HBO Max. Now, we talk a lot about fandom on our podcast. Uh, what was your background with Dune going into watching this movie?
All right. So, um not really until recently have I really discovered Dune. I do love science fiction, but I never got that into Dune when I was much younger. I never really read the books. I only saw the David Lynch movie actually about a year ago because I like the way this movie looked, and I've heard so much about it. It's so like iconic. Part of it I've just kind of absorbed through just osmosis with the sandworms and the spice and just the big like desert planet of Arrakis. So I feel like I already knew like bits of this story going in, or at least I thought I did,
Mm-hmm.
because Dune is just so dense. There's so many different books. Some written by Frank Herbert and some written by other writers.
Yeah, that's worth calling out. This isn't a completely original idea, right? It's based on the Frank Herbert novel, and it's not the first movie adaptation. Like you said, there's a 1984 David Lynch movie, and there's the original novel, but like you're saying, there's like a whole bunch of other Dune books also. So yeah, not a totally new thing. Sounds like fairly new to you, fairly new to me too. I had seen the David Lynch movie also, but that was it. I haven't read any of the books. And to add to that, I did watch the David Lynch movie, but it was a long time ago. Like you saw it what, last year? I saw it like, I can't even remember the last time I saw it, quite a long time ago. Um, so I don't have a whole lot to say about the previous movie. What little I remember I do remember it being pretty confusing. Like I didn't know what the hell was going on. So even though I had been introduced to the world of Dune prior to seeing the Denis Villeneuve version, I was basically going in fresh because I really didn't know what the hell was going on with that previous movie. Now you had seen it not that long ago. What's your like quick take on the David Lynch movie? What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I feel like the world of Dune is just so cool. Um and of course it's like multi-layered characters and story. And I still think that like shines through with the David Lynch one, but at the same time like uh I think the movie's like kind of corny. It's very dated. It's also like very confusing. There's a lot of internal monologues, a lot of just the character staring off in the distance, and they just say exactly what they're thinking in a whispering voice like this. You know, like that's a good amount of the movie, and that drags on so much. Um, I've actually heard a rumor somewhere that David Lynch actually hates this movie. I'm not sure how well documented that is or not, or if that's even true. It's just something I heard.
That
That
he hates the
mhm,
new one or his own movie?
his own movie,
Okay, yeah,
because it doesn't really fit in as much with the other David Lynch type films that you think of, like
yeah,
Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive.
yeah. That's true. Very
You
true.
know, it you know it feels much more like a Peter Jackson type movie. You know,
Yeah, that's a good take.
hmm but
Gotcha.
you know, it's still like kind of a classic in its own way. And the set
Mhm.
design is really fun and really cool.
Yeah, I do remember that. For its time, it was pretty interesting to look at. The costumes and just that universe.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing it to the big screen, something pretty fresh and new.
Oh yeah, and Sting.
And Sting, yeah. I guess if there's one reason to watch that movie, it's probably
Yeah,
Sting, right?
it's Sting.
He looks super cool. He's in a cool outfit. He has cool hair, and yeah, it's Sting. Okay, but I think Dune has leveled up in a big way with this
Mm-hmm.
new movie, and let's get right into it. So, like we were saying, spoiler alert, we're going to get into spoilers, but yeah, let's get into the positives. I know both of us enjoyed this movie, so let's get right into it. I know there are a number of things we enjoyed. I'll start off, you know, with this movie. Bottom line is this is an absolutely beautiful movie to look at. I mean, it is stunning, from beginning to end. It is just really, really like eye candy, Um, Not a huge surprise there because it's the same director as the director of Blade Runner 2049. Similarly, amazing visuals, right? So I definitely got the sense of okay, we know why Denis Villeneuve was hired to direct Dune, because they wanted like that beautiful aesthetic, right? And they got it. Oh my gosh, it's just really something to see, and we keep going back to it, but um, like if you have the opportunity to see this in the movie theaters, I would highly recommend it. I saw this on a fairly big TV. I have a fairly large TV, but it's like it's not big enough. This movie deserves the biggest screen possible, and yeah, so that's number one.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
The aesthetics of it.
oh, definitely, yeah. Like the way of course, the art direction, the camera work, his use of like lots of very wide shots, um, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, they all come together to give this movie this very like trance like effect I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
The world of Dune looks so alien. It takes place in like it was like 10191 I think was the date at the beginning. So
Right.
so far into the future.
Yeah.
Um and like it doesn't really feel grounded to earth at all,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like Blade Runner 2049, which took place in, in LA.
Right. In
And
the relatively near future.
yeah, in like 30 years. And then he also made Arrival, which is really great, which of course is much like placed in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I would definitely say this is like his most ambitious movie, and the movie feels like this big. It's pretty much the textbook definition of like epic, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point about when the movie takes place. I mean, when you get that little subtitle of, the year, and it's like 10,000 something, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is nuts. This is that far in the future. But everything you just mentioned, the cinematography, the art direction, production design, costume design, all this stuff, it makes you feel you're in the year like 10,000 something.
Mhm.
It's that foreign, right? It could be that far in the future. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's how much like an escape from our current reality this is. And yeah, it kind of needed to be, right? Because if you're that far in the future, you have to have very little trace of the current day. And every little detail of the movie does imply that, I mean, the clothes that people wear, the places that people go to, it just doesn't resemble anything like we see in our present day lives, right? And that's super cool. That is a huge part of science fiction, right? A huge appeal of science fiction is getting transported into a universe that doesn't really resemble your own, right?
Mhm.
And on that level, it's a total home run, right? You
Mhm.
know, not even counting, any of the acting performances or the dialogue, any of that. Like, we're just talking about just like the look of it. And you mentioned the music is awesome, I agree. The sounds, and just this world you're transported into, it really just takes you away. It's a true escape.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. And
Yeah.
yeah, okay, go ahead, Christian.
Oh, I was just saying, like it is like truly mesmerizing at times, um,
Yeah.
and like just with the shots that he can get. And I think what's also great is just like how deeply like the lore is, and when you watch it, it's so well made that you really want to like see more about this world and this lore, so you can go back and watch it again and pick up on all these little touches that are put in. Like the world just feels so lived in.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 So they kind of sell this world to you in so many ways. We've mentioned them, but yeah, it is worth saying that every little detail, like there's so much great attention to detail here. Like they didn't just focus in on the visual effects and the production design and some cinematography and just kind of mail it in with the costumes or something, right? No, the costumes are totally amazing too, right? Yes, if you really pay close attention to the detail in the clothes and just the weapons and the equipment, the vehicles, man, it is something else. It really
Mm-hmm.
is something else.
Yeah. Like one
So,
one oh yeah, go ahead.
okay, yeah, just real quick. Yeah, you had alluded to it earlier, but yeah, you're a big sci-fi fan, Christian. I'm definitely a fan of the genre. Um, fun. little exercise might be to, I don't know, categorize where does Dune fall? It seems pretty unique, but in the, I don't know, pantheon of science fiction, where does this one
Hmm.
lie? I
Like
mean,
what sort of like subgenre would you say Dune is? You know, subgenre of sci-fi, or where do you think like it is like in terms of like influence or?
yeah, like, well, I don't know, maybe dumbing it down a bit, but is there a sci-fi franchise that this resembles, or if not, what does it more closely resemble?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, sci-fi is kind of a broad genre, but there is stuff that is like kind of all across the spectrum when you talk about, like, I don't know, Star Wars and Star Trek. I mean, those two are like kind of polar opposites. um Alien, Planet of the Apes, like, I don't know. Dune doesn't really seem to fit any of those, but I mean, does it resemble any known sci-fi franchises at all?
Oh, I think so. I guess like Dune was like, you know, the book was written in 1965, and so I guess it's and is like one of those like highly influential series like Lord of the Rings. You there's like bits of it you do see in like almost any sci-fi. Um, but I think I would put it kind of like Star Wars, like it as a big, as like a space opera. Um, like one analogy I thought of what I was thinking of when I was watching Dune was like, you know, if game, it's if you consider Star Wars and Lord of the Rings kind of similar, you know, trilogy epics about someone rising to defeat the Dark Lord, which is either Sauron in Lord of the Rings, Darth Vader, Palpatine in Star Wars. Um, this is kind of, but Star Wars is sci-fi, and Lord of the Rings is fantasy. And then you have like the Game of Thrones, um, to Lord of the Rings. You know, the one uses fantasy elements that are very present from Lord of the Rings, but kind of twisted to be much more political. This is kind of like that Dune is to Star Wars what Game of Thrones is to Lord of the Rings.
I like
Like
that.
you do see like Star Wars is, you know, of course in a galaxy far far away, or a long long time ago in a galaxy far far away, um which is far enough away in like time and space to where, you know, it could be pretty much at the same time as Dune, you know.
Hmm.
And of course there's a lot of similarities. There's the giant worm in Empire Strikes Back,
Oh yeah.
things like that. The big desert planet Tatooine and Arrakis,
Yes.
um, and many, you know, many more similarities, I'm sure. But I would say like it does feel like that, you know. Oh, this feels like Star Wars a little bit, although Star Wars was like Dune originally.
Good call. I like that.
So yeah, I think that's where I would like classify it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the easy comparison is the desert landscapes, and I couldn't help but think of Star Wars a little bit when I was looking at some of the desert landscapes. And yeah, the sandworms too. You mentioned the big giant worm in Empire Strikes Back, but also in Return of the Jedi, the big Sarlacc pit.
Oh yeah, the
You
Sarlacc
know,
pit
yeah, it
too.
had those kind of little hairy things on the
Mm-hmm.
sides, right? Definitely reminiscent of the Dune sandworms, right? So yeah, kind of an interesting comparison because there are some similarities with Star Wars and Dune, but at the same time, they're very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe the biggest difference is I don't know, the mood, the tone. I think the tone of these franchises is so different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think with Dune, it's a more serious kind of storytelling. and a lot of people might view Star Wars as being a little bit more fun and lighthearted. So yes, certainly similarities, but certainly differences as well. So I know both of us like this quite a bit. Let's continue on. What else did we like about this movie? What do you got, Christian?
Yeah. Like I think that what else did I like about this movie? There's a lot um hmm sorry, I'm just checking through my notes. I'm seeing looking for something I think we haven't talked about yet. Um all right, well, let's talk about the story. Let's talk about the story
Sure.
of Dune and how layered it is and how complex it is. Um I think that there was a lot of exposition in the movie, um, which at times did kind of drag on. I guess if I was going to go into things I didn't like, I think it did kind of drag on at times with the exposition. But at the same time, the movie was like so beautiful and like very visually told
Yeah.
that it did manage to keep things interesting and immersive, even when it was moving at a much slower pace. Um, there's a lot of great setups and payoffs. I think with all the different little sci-fi aspects. Um, first is the armor. I think was really cool. The like you see him and the sword fight at the very beginning with Josh Brolin, where they introduce the armor and how they focus a lot on like hand-to-hand sword combat.
Hmm.
Um, and the way with the armor, how it turns red when you get a fatal blow in, but
Right.
mostly when you hit it, it's blue and it protects you. And I remember in the David Lynch movie, they only showed it for that one scene and then never again.
Right. Right.
But I thought was really cool in this one how you saw it every time they fight, and you saw people activate their special armor.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the Atreides house versus the Harkonnen house was a very good way to like kind of focus the plot. Um, Similar to the Snows and the Lannisters is a good way to focus season one of Game of Thrones. And like the Harkonnens, they didn't look as grotesque in this movie as I remember in the David Lynch one, where they had like warts on their all over their body and it looked like it was falling apart. Um, Whereas this one, they had like they're almost like kind of like a little bit orcish. They were like this like shade of green and like completely hairless, you know.
Hmm.
Um, like the big boss reminded me a little bit of the Kingpin, the Baron,
Yeah.
but he was like greenish, you know. Um, and I think like probably my favorite scene in the movie was the scene between the Baron and the Duke, Oscar Isaac's character, after Oscar Isaac has been betrayed by what's up, Doctor Wellington, Doctor Wellington Yu, um,
Yes.
and so he has the capsule in his mouth, and there's like it's very tense as you watch uh, the Baron give his evil monologue and talk about how he's won. Um, and you're just waiting for that big snap moment where he gets his he activates the poison and kills them both.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think like that's like an encapsulation of everything great about Doom right there. Or I can't help but almost call it Doom sometimes.
Yeah.
Dune.
Yes.
But like you have the politics, you have tense character moments, and you have the like the sci-fi world all kind of meshed together.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. This movie just kind of comes together well. Just one last time, just the look, feel, and sound of this is just a great experience. And yeah, like a lot of times when I'm evaluating a movie, a lot of it is coming down to the script and the acting performances, right? So even before we hear dialogue and we get, emotional beats from the characters, it just bears repeating. you know, this movie is it really is the craft of filmmaking at the highest levels. Just like camera placement and production design and sound and music and costume design, just a total home run on all those fronts. So then the question is, okay, it looks great, it sounds great, and I like, to me, I'm kind of already won over. I'm giving it a thumbs up on that basis alone. But typically, a good story, you need to have good acting performances. You got to have an emotional connection. These sorts of things. So how well does the movie do on that level? Well, overall, I think the cast was good. I think the performances were well done. I think in particular, Rebecca Ferguson is really great. She plays Lady Jessica Atreides. Um, she's the wife of the Duke, played by Oscar Isaac, and the mother of the main character, Paul, who's played by Timothy Chalamet. So, when she was first introduced, I'm like, oh, hey, it's the girl from Mission Impossible. She was in Rogue Nation. She was really great in
Oh
that,
yeah.
right? Um, and then when she was introduced, I'm like, oh man, she's just like the mom here. I was like, oh, that's kind of too bad. She was so great in that movie, but she probably just has this kind of minor mom role here. But boy, was I wrong, man. She is so awesome in this movie. And she is so much more than just a mom, right? She is a mom. She is maternal, but she's also dangerous and mysterious and beautiful and emotional, like kind of all at the same time. She's layered, and it's a really cool character. And yeah, I think her performance really stood out. Um, but overall, yeah, I thought the cast was pretty excellent. Um, and it definitely served, like, what I've been saying, the look and feel of the movie. And so that begs the question, and maybe we can start kind of inching towards potential negatives of the movie. But it begs the question, how much, or let's see. I've heard this term used with some of the criticism to this movie. Does this movie make you feel empty? It's beautiful to look at. It's it's this great experience, but is there a connection going on here? Because like we've been saying, it's kind of a serious movie, and it's kind of complex too. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of characters. um, there's so much focus on this great visceral experience. Are we getting the emotional connection to the characters? Do we care about the characters? These are the sort of questions that kind of popped in my head. Yeah, curious with your take on that. Did you feel like you got an emotional connection to these characters? Did you feel empty watching this movie?
Like I wouldn't say I felt like empty, um, but I do think there is like I feel like wooden is really the wrong word here. Um, in terms of like any sort of performance, I th- but the movie is about like aristocrats, the highest of the high, you know, the emperor and the kings
Yeah.
in a world that's so far from being grounded from our own. And so I didn't feel like as invested in these characters, and I wonder if that's the reason, is if um everything is kind of so far removed from earth.
Yeah.
um the There's so much like exposition with how many sci-fi elements are brought in and how this affects their daily lives. um and I think there's just kind of like so much to Dune. Like sometimes it feels like it kind of weighs it down emotionally a bit.
Yeah.
Like everything has some sort of logic behind it that it needs to explain to you, it needs to show you. And so it can be a little harder to attach yourself onto characters
Yeah.
as much. um Whereas if you, I guess, look at Blade Runner 2049, you have the character K, Ryan Gosling's character. And Ryan Gosling, well, isn't a human, he's a replicant. But um, the way the movie takes place not too much longer from here, so K has a job, he's a cop. And so there's a lot to that character in that sci-fi universe that's very, very easy to latch onto.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, he has his girlfriend Ana de Armas, that's someone to latch onto there. You know, his job is as the Blade Runner, that's someone to latch onto there, where he lives in LA. um it's very relatable. And so while I definitely was still like, you know, I saw the performances really shine through and bring, you know, do bring life to these characters. um as we talked about Rebecca Ferguson before and Oscar Isaac, I think Jason Momoa also brought some charisma to this movie.
Yeah.
But it does like, it can feel a little stiff at times,
Sure.
so to speak. Even if I wouldn't call any of it like wooden.
Yeah. 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 Good take. Yeah, I think there is a bit of emptiness here, you know. Yeah, there definitely is a lack of connection and like identifying with the characters. And I don't think we're necessarily meant to feel a connection. You know, this movie's taking kind of a different stance. I think the appeal of this movie is not so much identifying with the characters, putting yourself in their shoes, but rather it's like an escape. This is like pure escapism. It's transporting you into a different world. And I don't think they're setting out to have you feel like you're in the place of any of these characters. It's just completely transporting you elsewhere, right? Um, so yeah, I don't think it was their intention to do that. But yeah, I think bottom line is, yeah, there is a bit of an empty feeling. It doesn't feel like home. It feels like somewhere else. You're in a different universe. Um, but the other question though is like, oh, is this movie not really all that fun? You know, quote unquote fun. Is this not a fun movie? Um, so we keep saying it's fairly serious, right? There's not a whole lot of comedic moments going on. But I would argue it's still a fun movie, just fun in a different kind of way. Like I think it's pretty fun to see imagery that, you know, blows your mind. That's pretty fun to me, right? You know, I mean, shoot, it's a big reason I watch movies. I watch movies quite often to escape my reality, you know, to get away from the day to day of my life. you know, can it be cool to see characters that remind me of myself or remind me of people I know? Yeah, of course. But it also can be really cool to be completely transported away from my life, right? And that's what this movie does, right? It's an escape. So that's pretty cool. And just because it doesn't have, slapstick comedy or funny one-liners, doesn't mean it can't be fun. The experience I went through watching this movie was a fun experience. I like getting blown away by jaw-dropping visuals. Hell yeah, man! I thought this was fun. What about you? What was a fun factor for you on this movie, Christian?
Yeah, you're right. It is was a different kind of fun in a way. It was like, and the fun was in just watching the jaw dropping like awe and scope of it. Um, Whereas like I guess if you compare it to like Guardians of the Galaxy, um, like another movie I think is really fun. It's like that movie's fun lies in like the banter between the characters, between the different Guardians, and like the fun like roller coastery Marvel set pieces. Whereas like this movie much moves much like slower pace and like really brings you into this world. Like the fun is in the immersion, you know.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, it is interesting. We mentioned the comparisons to Star Wars. The emotional connection is a big difference, I think, right? So, like, for example, the Luke Skywalker character, when you're introduced to Luke Skywalker, he does feel like someone you might know, right? Is this guy who just feels like, you know, he's meant to do bigger things than he's doing. And the way he talks is like, someone you might know. But with this Paul character, it's in Dune, it's very different, right? It's not really someone you can identify with so much, right? The way he speaks and just his situation, he's like royalty, right? Um, so yeah, yeah. Again, I think it's um it's not really meant for you to have that sort of experience to really feel this like emotional identifying with the characters. And instead it's more of an escape. It's like it's mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anything else that you had a problem with this movie?
Hmm.
Any shortcomings?
Like, um, I guess this is not so much of a shortcoming. I think within the film itself. Um, but I think I'm not sure if they've announced that they are doing a sequel by now. But I remember when this came out, the big buzz around it was that Denis Villeneuve did not know if he was going to be able to make a second Dune, and it
Mm.
was dependent on whether this movie does well. And I'm not really sure how those metrics would work with the same day release on HBO Max for no extra cost. Um, and if they will. So there is like a weird limbo that this movie does live in because it's so much setup and it's just the first half of the story. And it does feel like it is like missing a that big act 3 payoff. Kind of like we got, like I said with the David Lynch one with that battle at the end. And so like while that has nothing to do with the movie itself, it says Dune Chapter 1 or Part 1, in the opening. Um, but it also like it brings a question about it, like it is coming, right? Like
Yeah.
I got so invested in this, like you guys are gonna make part two, right? Like, and so like I think COVID also like is the big perpetrator.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
COVID hitting. I forget when this was originally supposed to release, but I feel like was it last year? Was when it was originally supposed to release?
I'm not sure. I think so, but I'm not sure.
I don't remember. It feels like a decade ago because
Yeah.
that's COVID.
Yeah.
And so I imagine it probably just screwed up so much of this movie in just its very final stages
Hmm.
behind the scenes. Like there's probably so much more that we don't know about that probably affected this movie in regards to COVID. And so it makes for like a very strange situation and a very, I guess, like strange feeling at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will also say that like there's been such great word of mouth about this movie, and like it does seem like everyone's talking about it. So I think if the buzz is good and people do see it, that it will do well, and we will get that Dune Part 2 if they haven't announced it already.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, in the current age of movies, we're used to knowing, right? It's like, oh, there's gonna be a Hobbit trilogy. We know this. They're shooting Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame back to back. You're gonna get them. There's gonna be a year between movies, but you're gonna get them. With Dune, we don't know. It just came out, but I just a little search, and it's not definitive. Dune Part Two is not, for sure. Apparently, it sounds quite optimistic, and the expectation is that it will be produced. But yeah, it's not for sure right now. So it's kind of odd to be in that limbo state. Um,
Which might also mean like even if it does come, like when do you think we'll realistically see Dune Part 2?
might be a while. Might
Like,
be a long
yeah,
while.
could be like
Yeah,
2024 at the earliest. We might not see it for like 4 or 5 years.
that's what I'm thinking. A movie like this, if they didn't shoot it back to back, like the movies I described earlier, it's gonna be a while. Obviously they're not gonna rush a movie like Dune Part Two, right? So yeah, patience. Got to be
Yeah,
patient there. And speaking of Part One and Two, I had no idea that they were gonna split this up. So I mean, literally last night, I watched this movie last night, popped it on, opening credits, it says Dune, and then you know part one. I'm like, what the fuck? Wait, what is that? I had no idea. And automatically I'm like, oh shit, this is not the full story. Like that was my takeaway when I saw that part one come up on the screen, right? So yeah, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. um I had a negative reaction when I saw that part one. um but like I've been saying, I really enjoyed the movie for a number of reasons. However, at the end, it's not a definitive end. It's more of a to be continued kind of ending to the movie, right? um I feel like there's a lot of great takeaways from this movie, a lot uh to enjoy from it, and ultimately I had a really positive experience. um but it did feel a little odd, ending the movie on like somewhat of a cliffhanger. um yeah. What are your thoughts on the ending? Did you feel like a little bit of disappointment, or did you feel like it was just sort of not a standalone movie? Like, does this not work as a standalone movie because it's part one? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that it's like a stand. It works as a standalone movie, and that like I imagine like they'll probably go a lot more into Paul in the next movie, really like give it like focus on his character a lot more, and then like I didn't really know that it was going to be Dune Chapter One, but or Part One going into this movie. But I think when I saw that, I was like, well, Dune's so long anyway. I guess that makes sense. And how like all over the place the David Lynch movie was,
Yeah,
and so it's like, oh, okay, well, let's just see what this is then.
right, right.
But it does leave on a cliffhanger, and it's like not the biggest scene to end on, you know. The scene in the plane, they're the ornithopter at the end when they're Paul does the voice on the guard, and they have the fight in there, and they're trying to escape the sandworm. The sandworm was like awesome,
Yeah,
but it kind of just ends with them in the just in the middle of the desert.
right.
And so
Yeah,
like, yeah, it was like, oh man, I want to see more. I want to see what's next.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. In a lot of ways, you can't consider it a standalone movie. And you're in this kind of weird place where you can't consider it a standalone, but the sequel is not green lit, right? So it's this weird place we're all in. At the same time, it's kind of a unique experience where I kind of feel like you could consider this a standalone, where, I mean, look, we keep talking about how the storyline is pretty complex, and you can get wrapped up in the details and like rewatch scenes and kind of research the mythology and read the books and etc etc. But you can also kind of just enjoy this movie without getting into all that. I think you can just kind of take it scene by scene. You mentioned there's that cool scene where the Duke uh, bites down on the false tooth and um, tries to kill off the rival Baron, right? Um, there's a lot of tension, a lot of drama in just that scene alone, right? And I feel like this movie, you can kind of enjoy it scene to scene, right? There's that there's this scene where Paul and his mother are essentially being sent to the sandworms to be executed, and they have to use their uh, telepathy powers to escape the situation. And that's a pretty cool little scene too. And like all the sandworm related scenes are cool. There's one where there's like a equipment malfunction where the Duke and his people have to rescue these spice miners from a sandworm attack. A lot of tension and excitement and action in that scene. Um, so it's just like these great moments, and um, when I look at this movie, it's just like, okay, it's beautiful to look at, it's beautiful to experience, and it's awesome to hear the music and everything. And you have these great dramatic scenes sprinkled throughout. There's also this great battle too when the Harkonnens attack, right? Epic battle, like right in the middle of the movie. Pretty cool. So yeah, kind of a unique experience where, like I've been saying, like I don't know if I care about the characters all that much. I don't relate to them all that much. And in the grand scheme of it, it's not really like a complete story, but I'm just enjoying the hell out of the movie regardless, right? So yeah, it's kind of a unique experience. So if you go in just wanting to be wowed by the visuals and get to experience these cool scenes, like you mentioned, Jason Momoa, he is like charismatic as always, and he has some pretty cool action moments. Yeah, just a lot of fun things to experience, and a movie that I enjoyed, maybe not in the way I typically enjoy movies, definitely, but enjoyed quite a bit, nevertheless. All right. Any last thoughts on Dune before we get into our ratings? Any random thoughts? Any things that
Hmm.
popped in your head then or now?
Let's see. Nah, not really. I think I just let's get to our final ratings.
Cool. Yeah. Just yeah, one random thought. When I started watching this movie, especially when they threw up that date, right? The year 10,000 something, right? I just got hit with this like feeling of, okay, this is hardcore sci-fi. you know, this is this
Oh
is like
yeah.
serious sci-fi. We're going there, man. And yeah, I don't know if I was necessarily in the mood for that. Um, yeah, a lot of the stuff I enjoy these days, like Disney content, Star Wars, Marvel. There is kind of a fun, light factor to a lot of that stuff. Um, yeah, like look at the MCU stuff. There's always like some level of comedy, right? Um, and a lot of it, is maybe geared toward younger audiences. And this movie is a big 180 from all that, right? It's serious and not really meant for a younger audience so much. And yeah, this movie really could have turned me off. I think it could have felt like a, I don't know, a boring, not very fun movie, right? But it didn't. It didn't. Yeah, let's get into our ratings here. Maybe just flowing off of what I've been saying. Yeah, I think this maybe is a kind of movie that I typically don't love, but I appreciate the hell out of it. The craft of this movie, to experience this movie is to see and hear things you just don't see much at all. Like the quality, it's just such great quality filmmaking. And yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And yeah, being as open-minded as I can be, kind of like what I was saying earlier, I think this movie is fun in a very different kind of way. If you're kind of set in your ways and you need to hear a joke to enjoy yourself watching TV or movies, well then like that's too bad for you because you probably can't enjoy a movie like this, right? This is, yeah, we keep saying it, but it's fun in a different way. And yeah, every single frame in this movie is something you could maybe like put it up on your wall as artwork. It's that beautiful to look at. um yeah, we've gone into a lot of the positives of the movie, but I'll go right back to where I started from, and that is the aesthetics. The aesthetics of this movie is just jaw-dropping. It is jaw-droppingly gorgeous, and for that alone, it is absolutely worth watching. um I'm not going to go full 5 out of 5, just because I think inherently, with this style of movie, it's hard to really connect, right? Get that emotional connection. So I think I'm going to go with a 4 out of 5, but definitely a high recommendation for Dune. How about you, Christian?
Hmm. Yeah. I think you make a really good point about levity and the like that kind of fun charm of like a lot of like Marvel and Star Wars and like a lot of great movies that like there really isn't much levity in this film.
Yeah.
And like yeah, there isn't a lot of that like very like personable charm um that like you get from a lot of these blockbusters, of course. um and so like yeah, it does kind of I guess like the mood never really like lightens up too much, when you watch it.
Yeah.
And there are some parts that can be, it's like it's a bit of a downer at times, like. And so like yeah, you make a really good point about how there's like almost like a mood you have to be in to watch this. It's it's very long, and like it's it's very layered, of course. So it's like it fits very well into that like very hard sci-fi category, which I really like. I think I'll give this movie the full five. I think this is the kind of movie I was really looking for a while. Um, a new movie, hard sci-fi with great visuals and a lot of very visual storytelling. I think just like it's like a lot of that is packed into that. A lot of that, that full 5 out of 5 is packed into the visuals and the score and that like just trance like effect that it just has on you while you're watching this movie. Um, to where like even when it's being too slow or too weighed down by exposition and isn't like connecting you fully with these characters, um, it's still just guiding you through this like experience and like escape. And so yeah, full five. Definitely one of my favorite movies that I've seen this year.
Nice.
Probably my favorite so far.
High praise. Awesome. Yeah,
But
oh yeah, go ahead, Christian.
I guess like it does come with an asterisk a little bit, like you're also kind of like swept up so much into the movie that you just want more and you think there more is coming, but like if worst case scenario it doesn't, I'm not really I guess I'm not really sure how I'd feel about the movie down the line. Of course, like it's so wrapped up in being this two-parter that we'll also see how Dune turns out. So fingers crossed, but they've made a very, very good impression so far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point about movies. How, you know, they are viewed over time can change, right? How well do they age, etc. So that's why it's always fun getting, initial takes. Like, what are your first thoughts? We just saw this, like, just saw it, right? So it'll be interesting to see, over time how we feel about it. Oh, that's another thing that kind of popped in my head. Maybe why I'm not going the full five also, but I feel like I don't have a burning desire to rewatch this movie right now. I feel like I really enjoyed what I saw. I'm not scrambling to revisit it, you know, right away. So there's that. Um, oh, you mentioned it's kind of long too, right? We didn't talk about the runtime so much, and it's long. It's not like ridiculously long. It's about 2.5 hours. One thing that popped in my head though is not that long for a movie. 2.5 hours isn't crazy long, but for part one of two, that does seem maybe a little on the long side, right? If they're already splitting it up in two, um, couldn't they get closer to a 2 hour runtime? I don't know. Is there anything in this that you felt like maybe went on a little longer than it should have? Could they have trimmed the fat at all? could they
Hmm.
have made this into a closer to 2 hours movie?
Like I guess I'm not, since I haven't read the book and I've only seen the David Lynch movie where I forget how long the David Lynch movie was.
I think it
Um,
was about the same
Probably
length,
about as long,
maybe a
but
little
fit
bit
the whole
less.
book. Like
Yeah.
I think like I guess comparing to that, I'm like, oh, this is probably I guess how long it just has to be, you know. Um, and I guess it does feel like it does feel like an elongated first and second act structure, you know,
Hmm.
like the way we see like Paul's arc, how he's still very much learning to use his voice, and how you the first act before they set down on Arrakis is quite a while, where they have to set up the two houses, they have to set up the spice, they have to set up the planet, they have to set up, you know, the fighting and how the shields work, you know. Like it does feel like so much setup. So I think some of the like there's some of the length does feel in that, and I do think it does drag on a bit before they get to Arrakis and before you see the first sandworm attack. But I don't think there's any particular scene that I would trim though. I guess that's just doing it. That's how long it has to be. But I guess which brings me a question to you. Do you think Dune would work as a series of movies, since there's so many books, seeing the franchise continue down the line, or do you think you would see like a Game of Thrones type show where you have this high production show that goes on for so many seasons and covering the same thing but covers multiple books?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, you've brought up the Game of Thrones comparison a couple times now. And yeah, I do see a little bit of Game of Thrones type DNA in Dune. And if this franchise were to continue on, I could definitely see it being a TV series. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't feel like that's going to happen. But if for whatever reason these Dune movies just take off and just capture uh, the public's attention, and people are just craving more, I think that's the next logical step, right? Um, we're blown away by the visual experience, and we want to get to know all the little details, right? We want to get to know the characters better. We want to really get involved in what's going on with these rival houses and just this whole world of Dune, right? So that would make sense to me, to have the the stories continue on and go into more depth through a Game of Thrones like TV series. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but that would seem to be the next logical step. Um, and I think the reason I say that I don't think that's going to happen is because this franchise just doesn't seem like it's something that it's going towards like a mainstream audience. Like this doesn't seem to be something that like everyone's going to be talking about, like all of a sudden it just catches fire, becomes this like mainstream phenomenon. I just don't see it happening. And I think it's kind of cool that way. We've been mentioning how there's not a lot of levity in this movie, not many comedic moments, that sort of thing. I'm guessing there may have been some studio pressure, or I don't know, there might have been some execs going like, hey, can't you make it a little bit funnier or something? um and I think it's cool that they stuck to their guns. Like, no, that would just like kind of, it wouldn't feel right. right? With the visuals we're seeing, with the music we're hearing, just to have like some like comedic one-liners thrown in, it'd just be kind of weird, right? I can literally think of one line that was sort of funny, and that's when Jason Momoa is talking to Timothy Chalamet, and he kind of like rubs his arm a little bit. He's like, "Oh, hey, you've been muscling up. It's like feels like you're getting bigger here." And the Paul character's like, "Oh, really?" And then Momoa's like, "No." And
Oh yeah,
is
the one
pretty
joke.
pretty subtle, but it was a joke, and of course it did make its way into the trailer, right? So it made me think, like, I bet someone was like, "Can't you have a little bit more stuff like that? Make it funnier, you know?" But yeah, it's cool. Like, I feel like the director really got to make the movie he wanted to make. He had this
Mhm.
sort of singular vision, and and everything kind of fell in place around that vision. Everything was sort of in that same tone. So that's cool. And again, not a super mainstream sort of thing. It's quite serious, and I'm sure a lot of people, it's not their cup of tea. So yeah, I just don't see this franchise having a huge mainstream audience. And hey, that's okay by me. That's totally okay by me.
Yeah, same with me. Like it is Dune, and I've heard before that people have felt that Dune is unfilmable or unadaptable.
Yeah.
And imagine people are saying that for a long, long time. It's probably since it's been out since the '60s. I I do remember hearing that that was like buzz around Dune a long time ago, and maybe even with the David Lynch movie that they couldn't do Dune properly.
Yeah.
Um, so like, but this like while I haven't read the book, this does feel like it is Dune done properly.
Hmm. Yeah, that's worth mentioning too. The approach. I think the approach was really smart here, because there are a million ways to screw this up, right? You mentioned that this novel is kind of unfilmable, right? And I think if you're trying to do a direct adaptation, yeah, it is unfilmable. You can't make that movie, right? It's just too complicated, too many characters, etc., etc. So the approach was key, and I think the right approach was taken. You know, they just really focused on giving the audience this visceral experience, and everything else was kind of secondary, right? You know, once you get hit by the visuals, then oh, maybe you want to follow these characters and see what they're doing. Maybe you want to get involved in the storyline, and you can get into it, but to enjoy the movie, you don't have to necessarily deep dive into all the little details, right? The plot details, the character details. You can enjoy it on more of a just a feel level, a visceral level, right? So that's cool that you can kind of access it um, on different levels. So yeah, you know, that's kind of how I feel like. I feel like, okay, I really enjoy this movie on that visceral level, and I kind of don't need to revisit and really, you know, deep dive into all the story and character details. Uh, but it is kind of cool that if I wanted to, I could rewatch it and really start to understand the relationships between the different houses and the different characters and all this kind of stuff. And the sandworms and the spice and all this stuff, right? So kind of cool. You know, this is the kind of art that I enjoy, art that you can enjoy on different levels. So pretty cool that way. All right. With that, I think we can wrap it up. This is Farewell from Henry and Christian.